muy rápidamente. Eso se ha adecuado rápidamente a otro espacio para que pudiera tener un buen éxito en nuestra reunión. Me gustaría citarles entonces las presencias que tienen mucho honor acá. Encargado de negocios de representante diplomático de siguiente: señor diputado de Costa Rica, Carlos García. Señor diputado de Costa Rica, Leslie Rubén Borjorret León. Señor diputado de Guatemala, César Augusto Amezquita del Valle. Señora diputada de India, Deputy Mayushwari Singhvi. Me disculpa si la pronunciación no fue la correcta. Señor diputado de India, Gauravi Singh Pardí. Señor diputado de Paraguay, Cristian Gabriel Tornada Rotella. Señor diputado de Paraguay, Héctor Rubén Figueredo Notario. Señor diputado de Paraguay, Yalmil Esgaibe. Señor diputado de Perú, Magalice Esteban Sucrupe. Señora diputada de Perú, Margot Palacios Guamán. Señora diputada de Uruguay, Eliane Castro. Señor diputado de Uruguay, Juan José Olaizola. Señora diputada de Uruguay, Silvia Ibargure Galtier. Miembro del Parlamento de la República Trinidad y Tobago, señora Penélope Becker Robinson, representante de la Asamblea Nacional de la República de Ecuador, María Verónica Inigüez Gallardo, representantes de Colombia, Juan Carlos Lodaba, señor presidente del Parlamento Andino, Gustavo Pacheco Vilar, señor presidente de Parlamento, señor Iván Flores García, señor presidente de Palatino, Orlando Rosales Patricio, miembro del Parlamento de Mercosur, señora diputada Cecilia Nicoline, enviado especial de las Islas Vírgenes Británicas, señor Benito Wheatley. Bueno, él lo dije ya. También presentes el diputado Pedro Cruzay de Brasil y la senadora Teresa Leitão, también senadora de Brasil. Mis buenas venidas. Yo voy entonces a hablar las palabras de apertura. Enseguida pasaré la palabra a los demás componentes de la mesa. Pues, estimados amigos parlamentarios de América Latina, el Caribe, ilustres y de India, ilustres representantes de la sociedad civil, señoras y señores, es con gran honor que me dijo a todos ustedes esta mañana, en la mañana en Brasilia, para lectura de esta segunda cumbre parlamentaria del cambio climático y transición justa. Como senador de la República, miembro fundador de la PPCC y liderazgo del gobierno del presidente Lula del Senado federal, yo vengo en este momento, una oportunidad histórica para los legisladores de nuestra región, el protagonismo para el enfrentamiento de una de las mayores crisis de nuestro tiempo. Es un momento de inflexión. Los eventos climáticos extremos se multiplican. Las comunidades más vulnerables sufren desproporcionalmente y los costos de la inacción se vuelven exponencialmente mayores. Vivimos una transformación fundamental en el orden global. Como dije el presidente Lula, el multilateralismo es el único camino para superar la urgencia climática. Pero hay que ser multilateralismo renovado y más inclusivo. La liderazgo del sur global en México es una necesidad histórica. Nosotros somos más afectados por la crisis climática que no creamos, pero somos también los detentores de las soluciones. La América Latina, el Caribe, abriga un 60% de obesidad mundial y las selvas esenciales para la regulación climática global. Llega el momento de la COP, guiada por el crucero del sur, por la luz que emerge del sur del globo. La COP 30 en Belén será orientada por 5 estrellas del crucero del sur, simbolizando los pilares de la acción climática: mitigación, adaptación, financiación, tecnología y capacitación. Brasil retomó su protagonismo ambiental
an environmental protagonist once again, reducing the deforestation in the Amazon by more than 50% in 2 years. And we presented one of the NDCs that is the most ambitious in the world, of up to 67% of reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. But our leadership goes beyond these figures. It is based upon a vision that places life in the center and acknowledges that there is no sustainable future without social justice. The fair transition is not only a technical concept, it is an ethical imperative. It means that nobody should be left behind in the necessary transformation of our economies, especially the workers in industries that emit a lot, and also the vulnerable communities. We have to recognize the essential role of the indigenous peoples and traditional communities. Even though they represent 6% of the world's population, they protect 80% of the remaining biodiversity. But they receive less than 1% of all climate funding. COP30 in Belém has to be a moment to totally recognize their rights and knowledge. As lawmakers, we have insubstitutable responsibilities. We transform international commitments into national laws. We approve environmental budgets, and we monitor the compliance with all of these agreements. The Parliamentary Observatory on Climate Change has already shown in previous COPs the strength of the voices of all members of Parliament as long as they are united. We need to strengthen our coordination. Our Parliament should be spaces for legislative innovation, for renewable energies, for the protection of forests, for circular economy, and also the rights of our future generations. It's essential to emphasize that there is no fair transition without adequate funding. The nations have established a new goal climate funding in 2024, committing themselves to use at least $300 billion every year for climate actions in the developing countries up until 2035. The developed nations agreed to assume the leadership in the compliance with this goal, but the real needs, they are about 1.3 trillion annually up until 2035. We need commitment, even economic commitment from all, mainly from the wealthiest countries that can and should contribute more. The president of COP, Mr. Ambassador André Correia do Lago, is talking about a global union to face the climate crisis. This Brazilian concept translates the spirit that should guide us, a collective effort full of solidarity. As members of parliament, we are the bridges between society and the state, between local demands and global commitments. We would like to invite all of our friends to assume concrete commitments to pass meaningful laws that support the fair transition and are going to ensure a sustainable future, ensuring adequate funding for climate policies, effectively including the most vulnerable in our decisions, and to strengthen our regional coordination. Dear friends, we are the generation that can change the path of the climate crisis. We represent the most biodiversified region on the planet. We have solutions based on nature and also sound democratic traditions. Leadership cannot be stated. It is achieved through action. May we be able to leave this place with a common agenda, concrete goals, and the determination of those who know that the time for rhetoric is over. Latin America and the Caribbean should be the protagonists of a global and fair transition. Guided by the South Cross, let's start this union, global union for life, for justice, and for sustainability. Our peoples are waiting for our leadership. The future generations depend on our boldness. Thank you very, very much. May we have 2 transforming days. Thank you very much. I would also like to mention the presence of the Brazilian Senator, Leila Barros, representing the Federal District. And she used to be the chair of the Environment Committee, and Congressman Bon Gas. He's also a Brazilian. He's also here. And the Congressman from Guatemala, César Augusto Amezquita del Valle. I have many pieces of paper in front of me. Oh my goodness. I would like to pass the floor the National Congressman Nilto Tatto, and he's also one of the people who requested this session. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to my colleagues from other countries. Welcome to Brazil. I would like to greet our President, Jaques Wagner. He is the founder of the OPCC. I would like to greet the President of COP30, Ambassador André Correia do Lago, and also the Deputy President of ECLAC, Mr. Javier Vasquez. I would like to greet all of you who are here today, face-to-face, and those who are watching us online. Good morning to all. First of all, I would like to greet the chair of the session, His Excellency Mr. Jaques, and he has the mission now of doing one of the largest climate summits in the world, and to Mr. Javier Medina Vasquez, the Deputy President of ECLAC, and via whom I would like to greet all of the ambassadors and representatives from other nations present here. I thank you for Brazil having been chosen to be the host of this summit, which this event is very important to unite our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, this summit aims to move forward when it comes to the creation of the next OPCC joint document involving congressmen and congresswomen and members of parliament from Latin America and the Caribbean. So we have to include some priority topics so that we can produce, have a green economy, focusing on the transitions of the future. All of this starting from a critical balance of the gaps and critical challenges. After 30 years for the implementation of the sustainable agenda. So the topic of the summit is aligned with the historic moment that Brazil is going through. With the election of President Lula, President Lula started the reunification agenda, and in the previous administrations, the cooperation and integration, they were strategic axis of the policy when it came to foreign affairs. This is a crucial moment and also represented a leap so that we could start a regional project. Was in 2008 in Bahia, we had the Latin American and the Caribbean Summit about development, CALC, and the meeting of ECLAC, the community of Latin American and Caribbean countries. At the opening of the event, President Lula mentioned the need and the power of the initiative.
We will overcome our issues only if we take on a Latin American and Caribbean vocation. We must do it without a confrontational spirit with whomever it may be. Our unity must be understood as a contribution for a new multipolar world as well as multilateral. The challenges are many, as the subjects that we chose: financial crisis, energy crisis, food crisis, and environmental crisis. The uncertainties that forces us to search for innovative and solid solutions. The integration mechanisms in our region offer a solid starting point. 16 years later, many things happened in our region, but the problems and challenges still continue. Although in some countries with more or less gravity, making our president's words even more important. The first progressive governments that we had in the first part of the 21st century took many people out of the map of hunger and of poverty, a huge quantity of people. For the first time of centuries of colonization and hegemony of global north countries, we leave the subordinate position, implementing development projects with sovereignty from the interests and needs of our society. However, in the next decade, progressiveness suffered many blows, and many of the popular conquests were reverted or are threatened. We are now in a very turbulent moment with the ascension of extreme right in many parts. In the US, the return of Donald Trump and governments aligned to him and to European countries put in jeopardy our previous victories and feeds the negationist rhetoric for climate crisis. We have yet another period in the history that marks steps back, but as always, it's also a moment of resistance and imagining a better world. The only way we can build a new reality if before that we can if they are imagined first. At this summit, that now happens for the second time, is an open-air lab. We are committed with ECLAC, with the parliaments, and the people of Latin America and the Caribbean to make the next steps towards an integration project that may conduct us to a development that operates in our countries in a historical manner. A project founded with combined access that promotes social inclusion, environmental sustainability, democracy, sovereignty, and regional integration. We are already advancing, and many initiatives are already underway involving subjects such as environment, water, resources, natural disasters, infrastructure, logistic, energetic interconnection, and clean energy, digital transformation, defense, safety, and border integration, fighting transnational crimes, and cyber security. All these aspects dialogue, mobilize, and give practical meaning to the parliamentary observatory that gathers us. But perhaps one of our biggest challenges, the main task that we have at this moment, is that of putting an imperative on climate change and to put fair transition at the center in all integration projects of Latin America and the Caribbean. We must recognize this horizon of strategic unity and future for the region is still not a given, demanding more efforts of planning and mobilization within the governments, the parliaments, and organized civil societies. There's also an internal need for each country where we need and have important advances to share. In the Brazilian case, just to anticipate one of the measures that we've adopted, the creation of the Pact of the Ecologic Transformation between the three powers is something innovative with an agenda committed to social justice and climate justice. The pact was instituted by a presidential executive order for ecologic transformation as a adaptation plan and other actions for ecologic transition. As one of the many representatives of the pact, we will establish points as well with the OPCC. It's very clear just no country in the region can face the challenges we have in an isolated manner. The COP30 represents an extraordinary opportunity, transforming the continental Amazon on a great platform of leverage for the regional integration project. With the Amazon speaking to their people and the countries that have the Amazon, we can develop a global pact that will make the Amazon at the vanguard of the just ecologic transformation that we hope for. We now have the second summit of fair and climate justice in Latin America and Caribbean, a space for resistance and a response to any political and economic threats for our countries of the region. To deny the authoritarian attacks and to have a unified Latin American Caribbean able to create the future that we want. Thank you. Thank you and congratulations for your speech, Congressman. I'd also like to highlight the presence of the Guatemalan Congressman, David Lucas, and the Cuban Ambassador Adolfo Corbelo Castellanos. I invite now to give his speech Ambassador André Correa do Lago, President of COP30. Good morning, all. Senator Jaques Wagner, it's a great honor to be here at this event and with Nilto Tatto. Two congressmen, parliamentaries that have extraordinary histories behind them. Also to greet the Vice Executive Secretary of CLAC, Mr. Vasquez, to greet the ambassadors here present, the Brazilian parliamentaries, the foreign parliamentaries. A special greetings to the Indian parliamentaries, since I was once ambassador of Brazil in India, and it was one of my happiest years in my career. I'd like to comment, first of all, how much the name of this meeting is completely adequate for the moment of COP30. Climate change and fair and transition is probably one of the most delicate and important subjects that COP30 is going to deal with. Because we know the challenges of climate change for quite some time. We do know them every time better, but everything is going to depend on how we can win everyone over through a fair transition, just transition. Because in Europe, the electors, the voters, are voting for those who criticize the price of energy. Our developing countries for the elimination of certain activities that create unemployment. We cannot let the climate change agenda to be interpreted in a completely inadequate manner, that this agenda is negative from a social point of view. It's an agenda that must be always connected to development, to growth, to job creation, and the improvement of populations' lives. Within this context, Brazil, under the leadership of President Lula, is looking to concentrate on three priorities. The first one that was already mentioned by the senator, that is the strengthening of multilateralism. This strengthening, in reality, is the strengthening of democracy itself, because multilateralism is international democracy, and that, Mr. Chair, is therefore our first and main priority. We also want to ensure that there be a better understanding of what these COPs approve, the decisions that are taken, that are made, and what impact this can have on people's lives. So this is the second very big priority. That is that of translating for the population, to the civil society, to subnational agents, what it is that these COPs bring to and for the populations. And the third dimension Lula insists on is how much we have to broaden the climate solutions far beyond the COP's negotiation itself. We need to involve all the organizations, and we are here within this context. We have to involve everyone in the implementation, because all our countries agree that the correct place for the negotiations is the Climate Convention and Paris Agreement. So once these decisions are made, the establishment, implementation must be coordinated, must be done by many more international organisms, structures, than a structure that was imagined for the negotiation itself. And that's why we must involve the multilateral banks, the other international organizations, because if we believe in science, and this government definitely does, we have very few years to do that which must be done. And to prepare this COP30, and to undertake this mandate that Brazil has been given. We are first in a mobilization stage. I thank you for this idea of congregation because we're trying to involve the biggest number possible of actors and people in this preparation effort of COP30. So this period of mobilization took the presidents, made the presidency COP30 to create 5 circles that are expanding this discussion of climate change. One of the circles, the first one, is that of the COP presidents. So the presidents of the last COP since Paris is COP. And we asked Mr. Laurent Fabius, the president of the Paris COP, to lead this circle. Then we have the people's circles, because as was mentioned here, it is extremely important that we be able to involve several groups that were already very marginalized in the evolution of the economy and world economy, such as the indigenous people, Afro-descendants. And this circle of peoples is being coordinated by Minister Sonia Guajajara, who is the first minister for the indigenous peoples of Brazil, thanks to President Lula. And the third circle is the circle of the ministers of finance, is being led by our Minister of Finance, Haddad. And there's a big number of ministers that are working together, and they're working because there's greater awareness, especially since the G20 Brazilian presidents, of how important it is that the solutions and decisions of the COPs then transform themselves afterwards into something that involves all governments, the governments as a whole in all the countries, and not that it be a niche where only the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change are the ones that are in charge. The finance ministries give this broader general sense to the government. And that's why we have the involvement of the finance ministries. That is another Brazilian presidency innovation. And lastly, we're having circle of an ethical global balance with Minister Maria da Silva, the environment, and with the General Secretary Guterres. They're directly involved. And it's the minister's idea, Marina Silva's idea, that we must consult the society as a whole, all the way from regional leaders, local leaders, but also intellectual, intelligentsia, religious, because the evolution of climate change is going much faster than what we expected. And we must prepare the world for a kind of change that will probably require new ways of thinking. And that is the 4th circle that was created. And based on this, with this desire to ensure that COP30 can involve society far more, we created a series of special envoys, Brazilian and foreigners, that are helping accelerate this group effort and that create a direct bridge between the presidents and the many other sectors of society. I'd like to comment on the subjects that were raised for this session that I thought were very ideal, and they're connected to the beginning of this process in Rio de Janeiro in '92 on the Earth Summit in Rio '92. And what's happened since then? Because very often, many people think, wow, well, we've been negotiating this for 33 years. How has it evolved? How are we still negotiating? And no one can understand this better than parliamentaries, because we have a process, and it's a process that demands constant perfecting. And furthermore, in the case of climate change, there was a great evolution of science, but also of the economic thinking on the impact of climate change and the political impacts, of course, that were already commented. But the COPs perfect these processes on a yearly basis and create legislations that are internalized in the countries and that orient the countries in a dimension that is more, above all, based on science. And so since Rio 92, the idea would be that we should increase this historic responsibility of the involved countries every time more and the responsibility of the developing countries. And that's why the Kyoto Protocol was created 20 years ago to strengthen the main ideas of the climate convention that was signed in Rio. And despite having been negotiated with the US, the Kyoto Protocol ended up not being ratified by the American Senate. And there was already a strengthening of the Protocol of Kyoto. It was an instrument that was absolutely essential for the first great efforts for the fight against climate change. With some innovative ideas as the carbon market mechanism itself that is born from an idea developed by the US and Brazil. But unfortunately, the US Senate did not ratify it, and there was a huge impact due to that. And years later, it was decided to develop the Paris Agreement that was thought for the return of the US to the climate negotiation.
And this happened 10 years ago, and this is being hindered now because the Trump administration has already said that they are leaving the Paris Agreement, yes? So multilateralism, the climatic one, has been finding solutions, but it also has been facing meaningful challenges, okay? And we believe that COP30 is going to be a very specific moment in which we're going to be able to adjust and to find the best way to use these instruments. And the best way to use these instruments is acting, implementing them, because it's been already 30 years that we have accumulated when it comes to international legislation that has been internalized by our country, and therefore we can use it as a guide, okay? So COP30 is going to have a leaders summit, and then it's going to have 10 or 11 days of intense negotiations on important topics, even the fair transition, and alongside COP30, inside the same space that I call the blue space, we're going to have the action agenda. And this action agenda that Brazil is proposing is also very innovative. The action agenda was created in Paris, and it has existed since Paris, but the one that we are proposing is highly dense, and it's going to propose or have over 350 meetings with the actors that don't negotiate. So those who are coming to the COP are the subnational governments, the private sector, the civil society, those who do not usually negotiate, because it's usually the nations who negotiate. Those involved in technology, the academia, and based on these discussions, we're going to show that we already have huge responses, solutions for many, many of the challenges we're going to have to face. And therefore, the action agenda, I believe, is going to make the COP30 way, way more dynamic, and is going to allow the private sector, the subnational governments, and the other members of the civil society, make them able to contribute in an amazing way, because they're going to be able to use clearly what has already been approved. And the foundation of the action agenda is going to be the general balance of the Paris Agreement that was signed and accepted by consensus in Dubai. So I would like to invite all of you, and I believe parliamentarians have an essential role in this action agenda, and so we would like to count on sound work from the parliamentarians regarding this action agenda. When accepting this invitation to be here, I just wanted to highlight the importance of your presence in Belém. Belém is an amazing city. Its history is amazing, and it's going to welcome us in November in the heart of the Amazon. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador André Corrêa do Lago. I would also like to mention the presence of Federal Congressman Túlio Gadelha from Brazil and Senator Fabiano Contarato, also a Brazilian senator from the state of Espírito Santo, and the current chair of the Environment Commission at our National Congress. I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Javier Medina Vasquez, Deputy Executive Secretary of ICLAC. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our Executive Secretary, Mr. Signaki, I would like to start by greeting in a special way the host of the second Parliamentary Summit on Climate Change and Fair Transition from Latin America and the Caribbean, Senator Jaques Wagner, Congressman Nilto Tatto. Your Excellencies, thank you very much for the initiative of organizing the second Parliamentary Summit on Climate Change and Fair Transition here in the National Congress. And thank you for your leadership to strengthen the role of the lawmakers in the international climate agenda, okay? And so ECLAC and the Parliamentary Observatory on Climate Change and Fair Transition, thank you so much for organizing this in Brazil. And it's less than 100 days before we are going to have the COP30, okay? A COP30 in Belém do Pará in Brazil. I would also like to greet Ambassador André Corrêa do Lago, Chair of COP30. Ambassador, it's a great honor to be able to count on your presence here in this session. And so it has been 10 years since the Paris Agreement, and also 30 years from the Rio Summit. And here we have many countries being represented: Argentina, Bolivia, Belize, Guatemala, Colombia, the British Virgin Islands, Mexico, Panama, Paraguay, Uruguay, Trinidad and Tobago, Uruguay, and also India. I would also like to greet the coordinators, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to greet all of the representatives of the system present here today. I would like to thank you for the organization of this event. So, dear authorities, ladies and gentlemen, this summit could not have been happening in a most opportune moment and place such as Brazil. So the Brazilian Federal Senate in 2021 created this conception based on the work done by Senator Jaques Wagner to create an observatory to strengthen the parliamentary cooperation. Under his leadership, we also added Congressman Nilto Tatto, and they found support in many countries in the region. And so the observatory has become a reality. In over 15 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, they are part of the OPCC, and we hope it's going to continue growing and being strengthened. And it has an interactive model, and it has created over 500 bills of law that are being discussed in the respective parliaments of the 28 countries within the region. And they are trying to promote a fair transition. And they are also inviting everybody to start developing their nations with the green economy. It's a great honor for us at ECLAC to facilitate the work being done by the observatory. And it started and was created under the leadership of Brazil. The OPCC is a great symbol because Brazil and the region, they helped with the agendas and many multilateral agreements. It has been in effect since 2021.
It's a new mark for the region, as it's not just the environmental question for the Caribbean and Latin America, but also the first international treaty that includes disposition for the promotion and protection of the rights, human rights of the environment, defenders and champions. It already counts with 18 participating countries, and we hope that Brazil will soon join us with the COP30 at the COP30, since it had a fundamental role in negotiating process and even hosting one of the negotiating rounds here in Brasilia. I'd like to remind you also that in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil hosted the Earth Summit that established multilateral mechanisms can continue being one of the main international coordination spaces on sustainability, including the Climate Convention and the Biological Convention. And 20 years later, Rio 20 Plus asserted the basis of the 2030 agenda. We also have the great honor of being at this solemn meeting to have a very important person of this construction, Ambassador Andrea Corregda Lolago, that participated in historical moments at the summit of the Earth and leads the COP30. Nowadays, by inaugurating this summit, before COP30, we should celebrate the capacity that the region countries have, the ability to agree on consensus and agreeing on solutions to face the climate crisis. They're going to be very important and complex international scenario characterized with a new era of globalization and geopolitics. As we have planned in the ECLAC, the countries of Latin America and Caribbean are facing a development crisis constituted by three main axes that reinforce each other mutually and could take us to a new lost decade. I talking about the trap for development and also for social development, and as well of the trap of the weak institutional capacity and ineffective governance. Legislative power can contribute decisively to break away from these traps and therefore advance in a more productive, inclusive, and sustainable future in the region. We have signaled that the management of the necessary transformations is not going to be possible without more participative and transparent democracies where citizens participate actively for the future of humanity without leaving anyone behind. This is a moment where hope and commitment must overcome the fragmentation and lack of trust. by adding ourselves to the Brazilian call for the cooperation where Latin American Caribbean countries bring the support and dialogue for a consensus, an agenda consensus of formulating effective legislations and to exert the legislative control to create synergies at a national, international level, strengthen multilateralism, global climate regimens, and to ensure the implementation of the Agreement of Paris. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the moment of today's event is ideal, leading world leaders. That is going to be a historical opportunity in Brazil at COP for a more sustainable, inclusive future. With your leaderships, parliamentarians of Latin America and Caribbean, the second summit of climate change and fair transition is going to promote the discussion on how to support the advances of the action agenda under the Brazilian presidency for COP30 and consolidate a regional common voice on this crisis. 20 years after the Kyoto Protocol that marked the first international climate commitments that were legally binding, and 10 years after the Paris Agreement, 2025 marks the year where we're going to have a COP in the Southern Hemisphere. The single unique view from the Southern Hemisphere allows us to have a look at central objects for the Global South, such as the COP30 letter signals. One can only see the Southern Hemisphere from a Southern Hemisphere, and therefore the climate change must not be looked only through institutional social economic structures. COP30 can be an opportunity to recognize potential of the Latin American and Caribbean countries that can be relevant actors in producing solutions and technologies that are low in carbon, resilient, and sustainable, not just among themselves at a national level, but also between themselves at regional level or globally. The productive support and integration of green production chains are essential so that mitigation and adaptation can take place while increasing employment, jobs, social inclusion, creating a just transition. The parliamentarians of Latin America and Caribbean OPCC represented here at this summit showed their disposal and potential to lead the region in regards to these urgent structural emergencies. The OPCC presents a path to dialogue and parliamentarian interlocution dialogue that goes beyond borders. It's an honor for ECLAC to support the OPCC that constitutes a space of exchange between peers so that we can express our common voice in regards to global challenges and a forum to identify and build actions common for corporations and make that the good practices observed in the observatory be known. The letter of the presidency to COP30 being delivered to the president of COP30 confirms, with a signature of 37 parliamentarians, is a show of the engagement of Latin American Caribbean parliamentarians to consolidate our legacy, including global balance, looking for the answers of the climate crisis with a action perspective. ECLAC puts itself at disposal again to continue working with collaboration with Latin American and Caribbean countries. I wish you all an excellent summit, and I hope that under the spirit of mutirão, of cooperation, global cooperation, that we can reach significant progress in essential forums such as the COP30.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the kind words from Mr. Javier Medina, the Deputy Executive Secretary of ECLAC. Before moving on with our work this morning, just to be fair, I would like to remind you that ECLAC was essential in this coordination for the creation of the OPCC. The ideas, they come up, but somebody has to be in charge of organizing that. And the technical advisors from ECLAC for this process was truly, truly essential. And we started this walk together. And fortunately, this walk together is becoming stronger and stronger with the membership of new countries. We started with Latin America and the Caribbean, and we have the intention, and I would like to greet the presence of the parliamentarians from India, because we are extremely bold. We want to start here, but we want to expand this concept, okay? And I usually like to say that when it comes to social dramas that our modern world is going through, we can offer solidarity to one another. But when it comes to an environmental drama, regardless of our will or not, our motivation or not, environmental dramas goes into each and every one of our homes. Something that happens on the other side of the planet differently from social problems that shock us, environmental problems, solidarity are mandatory, because whatever happens anywhere in the world impacts the entire planet. So in my opinion, our idea was to give greater protagonism to the world parliaments, because the executive branches, they are elected by only a part of their population. And most of the parliaments, with their minorities and majorities, they represent the society as a whole. We have minorities and the majority parts of the population, but we have all kinds of people being represented there in our parliaments. So I believe that this initiative, that I believe it was essential to receive ECLAC's support to create it, is our attempt to try to exchange, as members of parliament, experiences that are positive for each country. And why not exchange? We're not going to impose anything upon one another. It is your parliament who's going to make the final decision. But at least this collective effort of trying to socialize the best ideas and to increase the parliamentary protagonism is something essential. And I like to say that we have just celebrated 80 years of the greatest terrible thing that humans did to one another, which was World War II. However, 80 years after World War II, I hadn't been born yet. I am 74. So when World War II ended, I hadn't been born yet. And I'm saying us because we are representing part of the system, as the opposition parties, as the parties that have been elected. So we promised the welfare state after that barbarian situation. And so the welfare state, 80 years later, does not include all of the populations. The social dramas are accumulating more and more, the environmental threat as well. And we are living in a world that is extremely polarized, and I mean polarized in a negative way, okay? Because polarization, when it is treated within a democracy, it's something positive. So the ideas clash and make us move forward. But when these ideas create ghettos, regardless of the side, then we are treating badly our welcome different ways of thinking. And now we're living through dangerous times in an environment or scenario that could be similar to what happened before World War II started, which is a scenario of total confrontation and not polarization of ideas, including with the attempt of us going back to a technological Cold War in the world. And I don't believe this is a good idea. So we cannot take a long time, because if we take a long time, we are going to find an even more dangerous situation happening. So I would like to greet all of you, and I would also like to announce the presence of Federal Congresswoman Dandara and National Congressman Fernando Milheiro. He's also a Brazilian member of parliament. Now, I would like to invite Congressman Nilto Tatto to read the letter that is going to be handed to the ambassador. It is a letter that was created for this summit, and it has already been signed by all of the members of parliament representing each country. And I would like to tell you that at the end, after we hand this letter, are we going to hand the letter here on the stage? Yes. I would like to invite the signatories of the letter so that we can take an official photo to represent the opening of this summit. Parliament letter supporting the Brazilian presidency of COP30. Your Excellency André Correia do Lago, Chair of COP30, we representatives from India, Latin America, the Caribbean, and members of the OPCC, we would like to express our total support for the organization of the COP30 in Brazil, as well as the Brazilian leadership of chairing the summit. It's going to take place in November of 2025 in the city of Belém, the state of Pará. This is going to be the first time that we're going to have a summit in the Amazon, an essential biome for the climate balance. And it is a very important symbol. So choosing the city of Belém is strategic because we are making evident the indigenous people, the traditional communities, and the most vulnerable peoples when it comes to the climate disasters. So we acknowledge the importance that the negotiations during COP30, they should prioritize a development model that is going to harmonize social justice, paying special attention to the needs and realities of the Global South. Aware of the geopolitical, social, and economic challenges that we're facing, we know that COP30 can become an inflection point, reestablishing international reliability and trust in the international mechanisms and the international agreements. And we are renewing our commitment with climate justice as the axis of a new development model. Having said this, we would like to endorse the organization of COP30 because it's going to be an urgent summit celebrating the opportunity for our country to take once again a leadership role when it comes to fighting against all climate changes. So facing climate change is essential so that we can transform commitments and international goals into sound, concrete actions that are sustainable and legitimate via legislation at the federal and subnational level. As elected representatives, we have the obligation of debating and creating solutions that are going to promote sustainable development, the protection of our ecosystems, and defending the rights of the most vulnerable populations. And so we should pass important pieces of legislation, comply with international documents and agreements, so that this can become this can pass at the national and subnational assemblies. So we're going to be guided by the South Cross. The Brazilian chair of COP30 is a historic opportunity to give voice to Latin American countries and to Caribbean countries in the international negotiations about the climate, presenting a perspective that is going to value the diversity of knowledge from the global south. Our countries and territories, they share a common structural problems, such as fighting against poverty, inequality, environmental degradation. We recognize that the environmental agenda has to be in the center of any development agenda. And we believe that COP30 should become a platform to strengthen the voice of the members of parliament in Latin America, in the Caribbean, and in the world debate when it comes to climate changes. At this moment, we have to show that our region is totally committed to the implementation of the Paris Agreement with the promotion of a fair energy transition, fighting against social inequalities. And so we understand the growing centrality of our parliaments in the implementation and monitoring of the climate agreements that have already been recognized by the Paris Agreement, and counting on initiatives. We would like to request the formalization of a group of members of parliament, and also a thematic group based on the Framework Convention of the UN on climate change. So the Brazilian chair would like to call us, all of the parliamentarians. So we are going to integrate different voices, territories, so that we can face the climate crisis together. So we are re-emphasizing our commitment, and we are collectively going to create this world effort. So it's a great honor to organize the second Parliamentary Summit on climate change and fair transition of Latin America and the Caribbean, and also COP30 that is going to take place in Belém. So this is signed by the House of Representatives and the Senate. So the purpose of this meeting is to debate our objectives, and also to share our visions and commitment aiming at the agenda. We know that the construction of long-lasting solutions for the climate crisis goes through the union of efforts, through dialogues among democratic organizations. So we believe that COP30 should and must be a milestone for the coordinated work among the Latin American and Caribbean parliaments and other partners, so that we can fight for a common future for our societies. So best regards. With our support, we're going to share this letter. And it has already been signed by a large number of members of parliament. And if any member of parliament who hasn't signed it yet would like to sign it, please let us know. Thank you very much. I would also like to mention the presence of the director, the Andean Parliament Governance Organization, Mr. Juan Pablo. Now, my final remarks. I would like to invite all of the parliamentarians that have signed the letter, please come closer to the panel so that we can take an official photo delivering the letter. So we're going to have a public hearing, okay, in plenary number 2. the spokespeople. They are going to conduct the delegations. We have 2 minibuses to take you. So I would like to thank all of you, and I declare that this session is concluded. Thank you very much.